Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. My name's Peter. This is Catch Up. This is a show to talk about stuff with people. I'm one of the people. Today, we're going to talk about some of the stuff. Every once in a while, when you're starting a show like this, you get this feeling before you talk to a creator, a person, of just overwhelming nervousness and anxiety. And I think that that's because you just see somebody that you're interested in talking to over TikTok or over your phone screen and on Instagram and things like that. And you build an image of them as, you know, they're so far out of your realm of being able to have a conversation with. And today is exactly one of those conversations. And I was very nervous, but I'm happy to say that it went incredibly well, and our guest today was just a very kind, gracious person to talk to, and such a interesting and impactful person in the online world. So this is a very important thing to talk about, an important episode, and I don't want to waste your time blabbering on about it here in the intro, so we're going to jump into it. Today I'm talking to Jesse Crosson, known online as Second Chancer. That's his handle on Instagram and TikTok and things. Jesse spent 19 years in Virginia prisons, and we'll get into his entire story. He'll tell you that entire story to start the conversation we had today, and he's done a lot of great work talking about criminal justice reform, sharing his story, talking about his path in life on online. So very excited to talk to him today. I'm really happy with how this conversation went and the things that we were able to get into. So yeah, enjoy the episode. Here we go. It was hard putting this together to think of a question that you haven't already answered on TikTok. You know, there's a million of them. So hopefully we'll get into some things that are a little more long form and get to expound on. But yeah, what's your story and your background for those who don't know?
So just after my 18th birthday, I was strung out on drugs and completely out of my mind. I committed a robbery and a shooting, and I was arrested and I was sent to prison, rightfully. There were a lot of details, like the sentencing guidelines in my case after I pleaded guilty were from 8 to 13 years. And then the day of sentencing, they were modified to 10 to 16 years. And then the judge sentenced me to 32 years. So there was this kind of like explosion of, unexpected events. But at the same time, this kind of battle within myself of like feeling like, oh, this isn't fair, but also recognizing like I caused this harm. Like I created the situation. Who am I to criticize like how this happened? And that was really kind of my principal struggle was like, is there a way forward? And is there a way to redemption? Because I felt like useless and lost and hopeless. And I felt like, when somebody sentences you to 32 years in prison, it doesn't feel like there's any way to move forward. Like you've essentially been sentenced to your life being over. Like even if you can get out in the future, you're going to be scrambling to try to catch up or, and I didn't have any idea then of the impact that I could have on other people in a positive way. It just felt like, okay, I've been like stuck in a corner and I have to sit there. So it was really this search of like, okay, how can I make the best of it? And sometimes making really good decisions and sometimes making really bad, sometimes having amazing positive influences, both inside and out. I had family and friends who supported me and who paid for my education and allowed me to kind of get to a place I never imagined I would be at. And I also had people on the inside and out kind of dragging me down and like trying to pull me into bad habits and trying to pull me into bad places. And I was really fortunate that I had more people on the positive side than on the negative side. So I ended up kind of growing as a result of the experience rather than regressing or becoming further traumatized. So I went through these ups and downs in prison, and there was a lot of, searching for meaning and searching for redemption and searching for a place. And where I really found that was realizing the impact that I could have on other people. So that was tutoring other people. It was being a mentor in a mental health program. It was writing essays. It was, having graduated from college, being able to then take another kid basically through what a college program would look like. Even though he couldn't afford tuition, we could get him the textbooks and we could go through each class because I think the biggest issue with him was he was extremely smart, but he didn't believe in himself. So he couldn't imagine that he could go to college. So even though we couldn't get him a diploma, what we could do is show him that he could basically compete or practice at the same level as all these kids that he thought were the smart kids in school because, he was the kid who was kind of grew up in the countryside. And because of where he came from, it was assumed that he would be slower. He needed special ed classes. He was incredibly intelligent. And I think he learned through that process that he had much higher kind of possibilities in his life than he ever imagined. He could have possibly, gone to college. He could go to grad school. He could do a lot more. So it was through realizing that I could have that positive impact on other people. And those really kind of like those just light switch moments. Like there was a guy that I tutored, to try to get his GED who had been trying for like 4 or 5 years and just felt hopeless. And it was the moment that he kind of got it on the math that had been holding him up that I realized like he's actually going to get his GED. Like this is going to happen. And I can't describe the like kind of like almost parental joy I felt. Like I wanted to dance around the room. And then the day he passed the test and he came back and gave me a big hug. And that was the only time he saw his family. And the whole 6 years he was locked up was they came to his GED graduation because it was really expensive. They did not have a lot. He grew up in a rough situation, but it was so significant to his family that he had graduated because most of his family had never graduated high school or gotten a GED. So this was like a family event. This just wasn't about him. So like those moments, being able to be a part of that really gave me the direction moving forward. So that was, and again, there were slips and there were fights and there were things you would think of in prison. But what it did was give me, again, where I wanted to go in my life. So then back in 2019, I had at that point served 17 years on my sentence. So from 2007 or 2002 to 2019. And so I wanted to put in for a petition for clemency because I waited until I had completed the high point of the guidelines, which would have been 16 years. And I was like, okay, at that point, I feel like now I can at least try to say, to the governor, would you be willing to give me clemency or commutation or a second chance? And I didn't really do it thinking it was going to happen. I just did it because I wanted to believe that I'd done everything in my power and that would mean that, okay, like even if I have to do this rest of the time, I can do it in peace. And things kind of snowballed because I did it not believing it would work. But then I had a reporter reach out to me and say, hey, I want to do a story about your situation. And I had other people reach out and I had this community support. And then basically fast forward to 2 years later, I'm sitting in the dormitory in the worst conditions I've ever been in prison, in the middle of COVID, just absolutely miserable, like on the most hopeless kind of place I've ever been. And they called me to the office and they said, Mr. Crosson, you're going home today. And an hour and a half later, I walk out and give my mom a hug for the first time in a year and a half. And I meet that reporter who has now become my girlfriend, and my world just kind of exploded. And that led to social media and speaking events and TV appearances and these things that, again, I could not have imagined.
Yeah. Wow. That's an incredible story. And I feel like I and probably many others have heard it in pieces across your web content and your videos, but it's really, really cool to hear it all kind of strung together like that. I think what you talk about with the almost parental feeling of guiding somebody else through that, like that. Yeah, I don't know. I can imagine that that's something that sticks with you maybe longer than many other experiences that you could have incarcerated, that would really be like a narrative thread, I guess, that continues on after you're out. Do you keep in touch with the guys that you were involved with in that you were able to help along?
Some yes and no. And that's been really one of the things I've struggled with. Like the guy that I helped get his GED, he got out years and years before me. And I was actually trying to get him to get out to my area because I knew if he got out to his area, it was just going to be all bad influences. And he got out with the right mindset and he got a good job and he got the good thing. But then he got into kind of like baby mama drama. And then he got arrested for being on a suspended license. And so I don't know what's happened to him since then. I've reached out. I've talked to people who are still locked up. And I have friends that I was locked up with that I'm still in contact with, but I've also had a lot of like strain on those relationships because I either don't know, like I'm now in the position of the person outside. And I always said, I don't care what you write about. I just want to talk to people. And now I'm like, man, I don't know what to write him about. And some of those relationships are stronger, but some were really based on common experience. Like we trained together, we played soccer together, we worked together. And now that we're out, like, yeah, we could go get lunch, but like there is no real shared common experience. It's almost like, my fiance calls it an archive relationship. It's like something that was good, but now it's kind of been just stuck in the back burner because there's really nothing new happening.
Yeah. Have you found that the transition of being out and making friends and having social connections outside is a very different experience to making friendships in there? Like what are the differences, do you think?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think my biggest struggle on the outside, besides like personal struggles, has been connecting with people and making friends because I mean, I guess for a couple of reasons. One, I initially was wary of whether to like reveal my past. I don't just walk up to people in the supermarket and be like, hey, I spent 19 years in prison. What's up? At the same time, I don't want that to be the entirety of my identity. And I've had people that do that they just want to ask me prison questions all day long. And I'm like, look, I do that on social media. Like, I don't really want to do that in my own life. I don't want to be rude. But if that's a relationship, it just feels kind of unbalanced. But in prison, you're kind of thrust into this common experience. And again, the guys that I may not connect with today, because we were in that common experience, we had a common struggle, there was a bond there. So like I felt connected to them in that place, whereas people out here in the world, it's kind of hard to relate to. And I have a friend who calls it like the trauma Goldilocks. Like you have to have somebody who has enough trauma that they're like interesting and they're complex, but not so much that they're just like a walking red flag. Sure. So it's hard to find people because sometimes people have lived like really wonderful, innocent lives, and I'm really happy for them. But it's hard for me to then like talk about something that I've been through or be open about like feelings or thoughts. And it just makes the relationship kind of unbalanced. But I've slowly managed to kind of piece together through motorcycles and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and just people that I've run across, like a group of friends. And actually through social media, like one of my best friends is a man in Ireland who I've never met before, but we connected and now we have a weekly call. Like every Friday we're on a Zoom call and we talked about writing books and we talked about doing things together. And I really like this guy. Like one of the things I'm most excited about is when I get off probation, I'm allowed to travel internationally, and Courtney and I are going to go meet him in Europe and we're going to like hang out in person. That's just really cool to me.
That's great. Yeah, that's super exciting. That's got to be like, I would assume from your side that the transition of social media being an avenue to talk to people at all is a huge change from when you went in, that when you come out now there's this universe, you have access to just about anybody alive. And those connections happen that you never, in a way you never could have planned, I think is probably the way to think of it. Well, I'm interested in what you said a little bit there about the social media content, that has increased your kind of ability to connect and reach out with people. And I really wonder, in your story, where did that start? When were you like, I should make TikToks and post on Instagram and tell my story here on the online space? Because I think that doesn't seem like something that would be, that you would just spontaneously think of, right? Like that comes with there's some importance to your story. So where did that idea start?
It was not my idea.
Okay.
So during that last 6 months that I was locked up, my then girlfriend, now fiance, because we understood that relationships had to have a common experience, said we need a project. Like we need something to do together because COVID, we can't have visits. Like we can't physically be together. Even if we can visit, we're still physically separated. So we decided to do a podcast. And so this was a project that we worked on and we talked about. And what she said is she shared it with her friends and she shared it. I don't think we got any like great number of downloads or views, but she was like, Jesse, people really want to hear this. Like people are really interested in this. This is important. You need to do this. So while I was locked up, I always said I was going to get out. I was going to go climb a mountain. I was going to like eat Chinese food. And I was just going to like kind of cry and scream and like do whatever I need to do to kind of like put that period behind me. Because I realized all this, like I didn't know the depth of it, but I realized I was kind of carrying this armor or this trauma or this something with me. And I wanted to be able to put it down. So a few weeks out, I was like, Courtney, I've got to go. I'm going to the top of the mountain. And she said, well, Jesse, you need to record this. And at first I was like, why? Like, that seems really like silly or exploitative or whatever. But I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I went up there and I just recorded a video and I posted it. And I thought it was just that. It was going to be like something for me. Like I would post it and then I would have a record of where I was. And I think it was like by the end of the day or by end of day 2, it had like 10,000 views. And I was like, is that a lot? Like, is that normal? She was like, yeah, that's a lot. Like, yeah. And it grew. And so, yeah, all of a sudden people started engaging and supporting or attacking but just engaging and especially asking questions. And what I found was it was incredibly kind of healing to me to be able to process things and talk about them in a way that was, I didn't have to say to a specific person, like I didn't have to pull somebody aside and dump all my trauma on them, but I also didn't have to like put on a good face. I could just talk about the truth, like the positive sides I saw or the things that I really struggled with or the emotional moments or just the daily things, because some of that I think it's interesting to me that people find it so interesting because I took for granted that everybody lived in a cell with a toilet in their cell for 20 years.
Right.
Like, so the different perspective was kind of interesting. And yeah, it just kind of compounded and built from there. And when I saw the interest was there, I started dumping the time into it. And there were a few times that Courtney was not happy. She was like, you're spending a lot of time on this. And like, I'd really like you to spend a lot more time on me. But it has opened so many more doors than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, how often now with the pace of videos you're putting out, how long do you spend on it? Like prep wise, I mean, for each video? It depends on the day. Like if I'm in a good, like centered state of mind, I can usually just sit down, like I'll do it in the morning or sometimes going at 3 today, and I'll just spend a couple minutes answering a question and going about my day. Other times when I'm stressed and like I've got a lot on my plate now because I just came back from California and I've got like 10 different projects going. I'm trying to manage them all and I've got some like personal stuff. And so it's a little more difficult and it ends up taking like 10 minutes to do a 1-minute video. And then I end up thinking about it but especially if I try to do long form stuff, which I really want to do because I keep getting requests for it. That's the hardest thing because on a TikTok, if you do a 30-second video and you mess up, okay, cool. Like you just do it again. Yeah. But if I'm like 10 minutes or 20 minutes into a video and I like lose where I'm at, I'm like, crap, I feel like I have to start over. I think some of that's this weird perfectionist thing because I feel like an obligation. Like I want to represent things honestly and genuinely from my perspective. And I don't want to have like some like edited, like compounded, put together thing because then I feel like people don't necessarily believe it or it doesn't come off as authentic. And I think it's really important for people to connect with the authenticity because very few people can relate with my actual experiences. What I found is that the common forces or the common experiences like underneath of that are really the same. And that's what I'm looking for is to connect with people and basically share the things that I've learned and learn from other people because it doesn't matter what the outside appearance of our lives have been. Like we've had the same internal struggles. Yeah. That's really neat. I feel like I've always appreciated about your content that it has that degree of authenticity. I think we're in the era of the internet where everybody's looking for, I'll just go up a mountain and record it to go viral. I'll do it so that I can achieve results and numbers and, whatever community so I can sell them an ebook that I wrote in 10 minutes. And then, and it's just kind of the cycle of trying to go viral and whatever. But yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, that people can't necessarily relate to your experience, but they can feel the authenticity. They know what you're going through because of how you talk about it and that you're not disguising it or putting something on top of it just to get internet cloud or have, things like that. You talk a lot about in prison life and that navigating that world, that over time, and a little bit of what you touched on with being able to mentor and kind of have a parental role for others, that you navigated that very well, that once you kind of got your feet under yourself and you were able to move forward, that you were able to accomplish a lot of things. But then I've seen in some of your videos you talk about when you leave prison, things seem all of a sudden very overwhelming, that to people on the outside, they would say, oh, I'm just paying the electrical bill, or I'm just, going to the store, or I'm whatever. And they don't even think about it. Do you think that as time goes on, that balance starts to shift, or maybe it already has in your life? Or is it still that you think those things will feel foreign or overwhelming or out there for a long time?
I hope they're going to get more normal, because I have like a really disparate response to things. Like I for the first time ever, I have a car payment. And so my car payment was supposed to auto draw from my bank account the other day. And like, I didn't see it in my bank account, and I started freaking out. Like, they're going to come repo my car. Like, what am I going to, just because I have this like stress response to things that isn't normal. Like, if it was just late, I would just pay a late fee, or it would affect my credit or something. But in my mind, like, it's a disaster. So I fixate on these little things because I've never been in that situation before. But at the same time, a lot of the things have gotten easier, but sometimes I still get flashes of how hard they can be. Like, when I first got out, one of the biggest things was like choice paralysis. Like, if I would go to the grocery store, I would just stand there slack jawed and be like, I don't know, how do you choose what cereal or what coffee, or what, like, I don't know, because for years you just ordered the Keefy yellow bag. Like, that was it. And actually the other day, 2 weeks ago, right before I left, I was standing, we were trying to get some cleaning supplies together for somebody's place that we were trying to help out, actually, this place here. And I was just standing in the grocery store, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And I was just like frozen. And I have a friend that I talk to, or I walk with every Thursday morning. So I called her up and I was like, hey, do you have a couple minutes? Like, could you come help me? And she was like, yeah. So she came and she helped me like pick things out, because I was overwhelmed by what other people would have just taken for granted. Like, so yeah, I think there are still spots of that in my life, but I'm hoping they continue to kind of reduce.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can't imagine that anybody in your situation, let alone someone who put in the effort to be like mentally in a good place and well adjusted and whatever, you have that as a help. And so I'm sure anybody in your situation would have similar, that kind of choice paralysis, and it helps contextualize for, I think, those of us that watch and engage with things that you put out. Like, yeah, we do have probably way too many choices and things that don't really matter, and it can clog up life where you are just standing in the cereal aisle being like, I don't know. There's just too many options, or there's too much available. And yeah, it's an interesting thing, but that's cool to hear that some things are starting to kind of move in the right direction for you, that you're able to adjust. Is that, do you think that maybe is part of the reason that some of that connective tissue to people on the inside that you maybe had friendship, relationship with, that doesn't maintain in the same way, that they don't have those things in their life?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It's that the common bonds that I had are becoming less and less. And then now my daily experience is even more different or distant from theirs. And it is hard. And there are guys, like, there's one now, he's mad at me. He sent me an email like, man, I haven't heard from you. And like, man, I get it. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't even know how to respond. Like, bro, I love you, but like, I don't know what to say. Like, and he wants me to send him a whole bunch of things where I don't know how to find this. Like, it's been a challenge to walk that boundary of like honoring the friendships that I had that are really important to me and will continue to be important to me, but also having new friendships and recognizing that I need to give priority to my life and my relationships out here.
Yeah. So is making videos and your short form content, then eventually long form content, I mean, is that the goal, is to scale that up and increase the reach of that? Like, what do you think is the trajectory of what you make online? Where do you want that to go?
I'm conflicted on that, because I don't want to tell prison stories forever. Like, that's not my goal. But at the same time, I like the awareness and the platform it's created for me to then talk about prison reform, or talk about trauma, or talk about what we can do to heal. It's allowed me to talk about the things that are really important. But it's kind of like you said about like doing things for like clout, or doing things for, a personal reason. Because if I do a video on like the serial killer I lived with, I'm going to get like 1 million or 12 million views. If I do one about, hey, this is the importance of trauma-informed care, and this is how we can do it, I get like 2,000 or 10,000.
Right.
And also, it's not about the views, it's about reaching the people that I can reach. But so it feels like a balance. And that's, at least for right now, that's what I see, is I have to tell some of the entertaining or the salacious or the whatever stories to kind of maintain a viewership. And then that gives me the opportunity to have like this Trojan horse of like, hey, these are important conversations we can have, or these are resources we can support, or these are things we can work towards like a better system. And eventually, I mean, I have a book proposal that I put together, and they wrote back and they were like, hey, we really want to use a ghostwriter. And I was like, man, F you, like, you're not going to tell my story. And then I look now, I was like, I don't have time to write a book. Maybe I just need to use a ghostwriter. Yeah. But I'm hoping that it'll be in a position to do kind of bigger work in reform, bigger work in kind of like in this space. But at the same time, I also really like when I can do non-prison stuff and I get good engagement, I get good responses, because that's like, to me, that's the story. It's like, it's a story of hope for everybody who has a family member locked up, that they can get out and like have a life, or for everybody who's getting ready to face incarceration, or for COs who can see, okay, maybe this person can turn their life around. I don't need to treat them terribly. Maybe if I support them, they'll do better. So it's really kind of a multifaceted approach, and it's not always very well defined or like orchestrated. It's just more kind of an organic expression of like where I'm at or what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great. I think it would be really exciting to see you do more stuff that's, talking about motorcycles or other interests and things like that, and that just expand the content. It really puts a very direct emphasis on the hope, reform, change, like continuing life for someone leaving prison, that it's not like once you're out, that's your story, that's your life forever. There's a lot, there's other interests. Have you had, I don't know, as the scope of your online presence has increased, has there been anything where, I don't know about any COs or anybody that has reached out to you to say, I like your content or I dislike it, or you kind of, is there any weirdness about people talking about you shouldn't share what goes on, where this is our kind of life inside? Like what's been that response?
Sure. I've gotten a range of responses. The one that I think is in a weird way the most meaningful is I have a Virginia Department of Correction CO who's been on my page just talking trash about me every time. Like every time I post something, he's like, oh, this guy, he doesn't follow the rules and he's not reformed. And I haven't been doing lives much lately, but I did one the other day and he came on there and he was like, I've talked a lot of shit about you, but like you're doing more with your life than anybody I've seen. And like, I'm sorry. And that to me is like that pivotal moment, like where somebody who has basically been against me is now saying, hey, like I see something positive here. And it's not about their feelings about me. It's about how that affects their feelings towards the people that they preside over, the people that they're responsible for. My hope is it'll have a positive impact. I've had people that tell me I need to kill myself. I've had people that said I should have been put to death. I've had people who say I've gotten the broad range of things, and I've sometimes have a thick skin, sometimes I don't. The ones that really get to me are the ones that like hit a grain of truth or hit an insecurity. Like if somebody's like, you're an effing idiot, I'm like, okay, like I can wear that. That doesn't bother me. But when somebody like, when I did a bunch of things for Courtney for her birthday last year, and somebody was like, man, you're selfish. You didn't do that for her. You did that for you. And I was like, oh my God, like, did I? Like, did I? And so all of a sudden I get really insecure and I kind of get in my head and I have to like check with her. And so it's been interesting to deal with knowing that on a daily basis, I'm going to get both positive comments and like absolutely hateful comments. And that's just part of like my daily diet. And that still sometimes takes some adjusting to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's like day one of the internet, but then you also have obviously your topics and everything are a little more, on an emotional. They pull at people's emotions, they pull at their experiences. It's people get a hate comment of them dancing to a TikTok or song or something that can all kind of be but you have a lot of your personality and your personal experience there. I'm sure that stuff is it's more vulnerable, and everybody can have thick skin when they can kind of steel themselves against it, but not anybody should have to take constant harassment, talking down to, things like that, which makes sense. It's been really exciting to see kind of the progression through your videos, you telling you and Courtney's story, and it's been really exciting. I wanted to say congratulations for getting engaged. That's a really exciting thing, and I'm sure very inspiring for people both on the inside and who have come out of prison who, are watching your story and seeing that not only do you have interests and hobbies and things that take your attention away from just kind of talking exclusively about one part of your life, but you have relationships that are meaningful and things like that. So that's really exciting. Congratulations. Very, very happy for the two of you. And is Courtney's work with the story and the things that she did on you, is that continuing? Like how much is she involved in the stuff that you make and the things that you do?
So sometimes she'll help me like film videos, or she'll help me, kind of with production ideas, because she came from TV news. So she has a lot of experience. She's got a successful podcast. But at the same time, she has her own passions. And our thing was, we want to have common experience, but we don't like her to work on my project or me to work on hers. We want to have our own things. So again, she'll be really helpful sometimes, especially with like AV stuff and getting recording done and getting things set up. But yeah, we try to kind of have our own experiences. And she's really focused on our podcast. Right now she has a drive time radio show here in Charlottesville, which is really cool because she's constantly like, I've been asked to like support a local political candidate. And I called her. I was like, hey, I don't know enough about this. She's like, well, that's great, because I've got that person and their two opponents on the air. So like, just listen to my radio shows. And so I'm tied in with that. But yeah, she has similar, well, she has similar interest in the criminal justice reform, but she's also a huge true crime fan. Like that's her thing. And that's not my thing. Like I've lived the crime thing. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna let you go over there with your podcast and like, you guys do a good job. And I'm gonna go over here and like ride motorcycles. Cause that's like way too traumatizing.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That stuff is blown up in the last couple of years. So it's really interesting to hear everybody's wide range of experiences. And obviously, you have, a very unique perspective on it. It makes sense that you wouldn't be super into all of that content all the time. But that's great. I wanted to talk a little bit. You mentioned that you both have that interest in criminal justice reform. And I think that has been, maybe with the rise of true crime content, that's been really talked about a lot, I think, in the public sphere. Maybe not as much as it should be. It definitely can always use more signal boost for people to kind of understand what goes on. But I think, I don't know, from my experience as just a internet consumer, kind of the average bystander, I feel like it has come under more scrutiny over the last couple of years. And that's really exciting because, right, I mean, anything that claims to enforce justice, you have to have constant kind of reassurance and knowledge that is happening. And if it's not, gotta work on it. But I do think that it gets voices like yours seem to get drowned out as time goes on by people who maybe know less but have a more of a sensationalized, I'm just going to talk about everything is horrible all the time or everything is perfect all the time, and there's no nuance and there's no knowledge. What do you think about the landscape of public discourse on criminal justice reform? Like, do you think it's headed in a good direction or it needs a course correct, or what do you think that's like right now?
It's a really good question. I mean, on the one hand, we've become much more polarized as a nation. We have our own little echo chambers that kind of agree with us, and people tend to be involved in that. At the same time, I've seen more interest and more open conversation about criminal justice reform now in the last year that I've been out than in the previous 10 years or 20 years combined. It wasn't something that you could have a platform. Like the idea of somebody 20 years ago getting on TV and talking about having been in prison, unless they were talking about like stabbing somebody or raping somebody or something like it never would have happened. But now, for whatever reason, and I think it's partly the true crime thing. I think it was kind of like the societal revolution around George Floyd and like, what does policing mean? And what is this actual experience? I think it's changed the willingness to have that discourse. We have a very conservative governor here in Virginia now, but who is all in support of reentry from prison. And 10 years ago, like that group of people was in no way in support. Like, oh, screw that. Like, we're just going to lock them up again anyways. So I think there's been an evolution across the board, and that the polarization on a lot of issues has kind of missed that there's becoming more and more this common ground of, hey, like we need to do what's fiscally responsible, we need to do what's socially responsible, and we need to do what's effective. And that's really the same thing, that actually like focusing on rehabilitation or restorative justice meets all those core values. And it's one of the few topics that I feel like the left and the right or that different groups can talk about. And I'm really grateful for that, because I feel like the opportunity now is kind of riper or more real than it has been. And so I had this perfect timing for, having a platform to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I would definitely agree. Your timing and entering that world of talking about that stuff has been great, because there's a lot of voices, but you get something that's sustainable that can actually continue because you have real experience with it, rather than just trying to drive clicks and grab a couple headlines and move on. Do you see a lot of other creators in that space? Do you follow like other people that have maybe a similar approach that you do to talking about criminal justice reform or things like that? Or is your platform kind of unique in that way? Do you think that you're the only one doing it in that way?
Oh no, there are definitely people, and there are people that are doing it really well. Earlier this year, I was really fortunate. We got together in Pennsylvania, I think 6 or 7 of us together, who were all like, we call ourselves like prison TikTokers, people who've done time and are now trying to do something positive since getting out. You have guys like Colin Ray, who has like 2.5 million followers, who, coaches Little League and raises money for the town that he's in and does really amazing work. You have Carrie Blankenshire, you have Morgan Godvin, you have Marcy, like you have these people who are doing really good work highlighting, and some of them are taking different approaches. Like Colin's a full-time content creator, whereas Carrie does like mostly coverage for the Marshall Project. She's got a best-selling book and is also like going to every execution in Texas and highlighting what's happening behind the scenes and like this really kind of hard-hitting, gut-wrenching kind of stuff. And so that people have taken different approaches, and I'm really fortunate. I'm really kind of thankful to be involved in that community. I was supposed to be going to Chicago to see Carrie speak at 2 events, but now I just got called to go speak in San Francisco, so I had to like change my plans. But these people have become, in a weird way, like we have a group chat, and like we check in with each other every day, and there's a sense of community there that I think I was lacking from prison, right? Because it's in prison, you have the people who have your back, who have the common experience, out here I've found like my kind of community or my tribe of people who've like been through the same experience and are trying to make the best of it. And just having them there to like bounce ideas off of or complain to or just listen to has really helped me.
It seems like the Venn diagram of people that are able to support each other in those specific ways, you kind of have to have, content creation, been in prison, like able to get along with other people who have that experience. Like it's tough to find a group like that. So it's really neat that you've been able to find a community that might be small now, but as time goes on, your guys' influence and reach and availability grows. You're able to connect with other people that have had that. Do you think that there's anything concrete that you're able to see when you see people make content out there about criminal justice reform or whatever that you would say that part of the discussion is unhelpful or it's not correct or it's, do you think there's any pressing problems in that, or do you think it just kind of, as it grows and people make videos like this, it'll kind of iron itself out?
I mean, I think it's what you said before. It's about people who have like kind of a one-sided view of like, this is all good or this is all bad. There's, there's a huge amount of criticism of prison labor. And I think that it's very valid. At the same time, I think work can be an incredible vehicle. And I actually am fully in support of people in prison having to work. In my mind, it's you don't have them work like they are in Texas, where they're working the hoe line, where they're having to like basically sweat and scrub for not getting paid, being mistreated, being shackled, being like there are situations that are absolutely horrendous. But I found that the work that I did, working as an electronics tech, working in the law library, working as a tutor, those things gave me a sense of meaning and purpose and agency in my life. And that was really powerful. So I think that, for example, saying, oh, prisoners should never work, this is exploitation. I get where people are coming from, but I don't think that really captures the whole of the issue. And similarly, I guess with like the abolition comment, people say, oh, we need to abolish all prisons. And I agree with the sentiment that what we're doing now doesn't work, but I don't agree with the idea that we don't need to incapacitate anybody. I think that there are some people, whether it's just immediately or short-term or long-term, who pose an immediate threat to the people around them or to society and need to be kind of taken away. And so when we say, oh, we just need to abolish all prisons and like it's going to be okay, well, if they have a concrete set in mind, if they have a plan in mind, if they have a way to keep people safe, I'm all for it. But I haven't had anybody kind of present that. So I'm okay with saying, okay, we need to abolish prisons as they exist and reform this or change this. But I think when we get into the like all cops are bastards or abolish prisons or this kind of language that's really just exclusionary, because that's no worse. I mean, to me, that's no better than saying, oh, all prisoners are bad people. Like if you're saying, oh, anybody's a bad person, like you're not having a conversation. You're just like yelling at the wind. And those are the ones that really bother me or that I really kind of take issue with. And I understand where they're coming from. They're coming from an emotional place. And I try to highlight, like when somebody leaves me a hate comment, the most common thing I'll say is like, man, it sounds like you need a hug. Like, I really hope you can get one. And I mean that sincerely. And people think I'm being a smartass, but the reality is every time I've ever been mean or every time I've ever lashed out at somebody, it's been because I've been hurting. And I recognize that when it's somebody else, when they have that anger, they have that pain and they're just trying to spread it out to somebody else. Well, we need to address their pain. We can't just yell at them or tell them to stop. Like they need help. And that's the whole point about prison is people need help because they're in pain and they're spreading that pain to other people. So I try to apply that across the board and say it's not just, prisoners that need a second chance or that deserve redemption or the opportunity for change. It's anybody, like wherever you come from.
Yeah. It's really powerful to hear that from somebody who very easily could have taken the approach of kind of I was wronged or I was sentenced in excess, so I'm going to have this aggressive, hateful kind of rhetoric and approach. And I think people may expect that from someone in your position, and so that's what makes your content and your personality that you put into your videos kind of surprising and refreshing. So they say, oh, well, I would expect he would say, yeah, all cops are bastards. I shouldn't have anything to do with the criminal justice system. They're all completely corrupt through and through. Because from your perspective, it wronged you and you had to kind of work to accomplish good things in that way. But it seems to be, that's a much more balanced way to think about it, to say nothing is all wholly good or bad.
Well, I want to highlight that because I think people have the idea that everybody in prison, like people used to ask me all the time, like, are cop killers celebrated? And one of the most common conversations I would have, especially with people from really bad neighborhoods, is they'd be like, yeah, I didn't like the cops, but I'm glad they're there because I got a grandma out there and I got a mom out there and I'm not out there to protect them. So I'm glad they have somebody they can call. And I think people are surprised when they hear that because they have this idea that it's like cops and robbers and this, antithetical kind of thing. I just did a law enforcement podcast recently, and I really liked the guy that I did the conversation with. And we agreed on probably 90 to 95% of the points. Like there were a couple of things we disagreed on, but I believe he was coming from a positive place. And I don't think that what he's doing is wrong. I think that we probably need to change some tactics and some training and some techniques, and we need to have a different role. But I love it when somebody steps into a role where they say, hey, my job is to keep people safe and to basically, what do they say? Protect and serve. I just think that unfortunately is not the case. And those are the issues where we really need to step in.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, and it's something that doesn't get the level of nuance that maybe it absolutely does deserve in public discourse. And I think it's really neat. You're able to do content on kind of both sides. You're able to talk to other people who have been to prison and they're making videos and they're doing public outreach and they're working in their community. And then you're also able to talk to law enforcement. And, you know, that story you just told about the CO in your comments kind of apologizing and talking to you and things like that, that you're able to bridge the gap between two groups maybe that not everybody would assume would automatically have any compatibility there. Within prison life and kind of talking about the reentry process, you talked a little bit in one of your recent videos about the day versus night kind of sleep schedule, rhythm of your day, and how that plays out. And I'm interested to hear you kind of talk about where that comes from, because I think we take for granted living, you know, just out in the world with kind of, as we talked about, unlimited choice or an overwhelming amount of choice sometimes, that if you sleep during the day or you whatever, you stay out all night, you do this and that, there's very little consequence maybe, but there's also very little lost there, because it's not that you're missing out on an opportunity to work or to better yourself. Sometimes you're just kind of doing it because you're lazy and you won't really suffer any consequence for it. But I thought it was really striking the way you talked in that video about how, you know, there was direct reasons that they were motivated to do that. There were things to do at night. They didn't want to work. They didn't whatever. So where do you think that comes from? What do you think is the cause of something like that being so pervasive?
We really can't talk about prisoners as a monolith. Like, we really can't talk about anybody, because I found that some people want to work and want to have like a meaningful engagement with their life. Some people are just profoundly depressed and just want to sleep or drink or, like, you know, just drug the kind of feelings away. And other people just feel hopeless and don't really know where to go, and they're kind of bouncing around. So I think what I found the most helpful was either finding a structure or creating a structure myself inside. Because without that structure, I really faltered and I really struggled and I was really lost. But when I had a routine, and one of the best things that happened to me was when I got moved into the honor pod at Buckingham for a year before I got sent to the dormitory for my last year. So about 2 years before I got out. And I was able to be in a single cell for the first time and actually like set my own routine. I was able to get up early in the morning and have a cup of coffee and meditate and read and clean the cell. And having that routine like gave my life kind of a regularity and a structure that felt really meaningful and felt really good and allowed me to be a lot more productive. And I think that's the idea of saying, okay, we're going to have a rec call and we're going to have a job call and we're going to have a whatever. But unfortunately, because you don't have enough jobs, or people are limited in their access to education, or people are limited in the access to programs, there ends up being this like kind of hopelessness and this inability to create their own structure. Because it took me 10 or 15 years to learn to create my own structure. Like, I bounced around and I was the guy who stayed up all night writing, or I was the guy who stayed up all night, you know, just listening to music, and it took me really kind of like growing up and maturing and having people help me build that structure. And by not creating it on the outside, like, we're expecting people to be kind of self-starters. And the problem is people are either self-starters in the wrong way because they were hustling or doing things that got them locked up, or they just didn't have that ability. And it's not going to come naturally to everybody. So if we're not providing that foundation on which people can build healthy lives, we can't really be surprised when they don't build healthy lives.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did your structure that you created for yourself in prison maintain and continue when you got out, or was that kind of a floor falls out from under you moment where it's like, suddenly I don't have a cell to clean, I don't have a, you know, coffee to make in the same way every morning, I'm not doing that? What was that adjustment like when it first happened?
It's definitely like the floor falling out. It's, you know, I was initially able to maintain getting up at the same time and doing my meditation, and, but I had that routine for a little while, and then it started kind of getting off, and I would get it back on, and it was an adjustment. And then it was things that I didn't have to account for that seemed so obvious to people. Like, when I first moved out, I was living with my mother, and I was like 45 minutes outside of town. So every time I wanted to go to work, I had to leave 45 minutes early. And for the previous almost 20 years, like, I was a 5-minute walk from anywhere. Like, there was nowhere that was more than a 5-minute walk away. So the idea of having to prepare that much earlier or do those things differently really kind of like threw me for a loop, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I've gone through periods just like I did in prison of like having a really strong structure out here and then feeling completely discombobulated. And like going to California for 2 weeks, I felt completely discombobulated because I'm like staying out with friends later, we're doing this, or we're having a meeting later. You know, it kind of threw me for a loop, and I'm trying to get back into that, and I'm still kind of jet lagged, and now I have to go to California again in 2 weeks, so I'm going to be like thrown again. But at the same time, that is such an incredible opportunity, and it's like a new I guess somebody told me a long time ago, you can look at everything as a new stress or a new opportunity. So I can sit here and like complain about the new challenges I have. I can be excited about like, wow, I got a new challenge I get to solve. Like I need to come up with new solutions and new things to work on. And I'm trying to really like nurture that curious, like excited part of myself rather than giving in to like, oh, I'm tired. No, I had 17 meetings today and I just want to go to sleep. Because they're really kind of like competing for energy. And the one that I feed more is going to be the one that's more prevalent.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure you especially seem to be a very busy person, a lot going on. So the structure there, I'm sure, is always in flux. And, it's like as soon as I get a routine down of what I'm going to do every morning, well, then I have to get up and do this instead. So that throws it off and it just goes all over the place. But it's cool to hear how you've developed that over time. And I think very few people get an opportunity to have some really dedicated time to figure out what kind of routine and structure works for you and to self-implement it. Because I think that a lot of people just kind of slowly acclimate into a life like you're leading now on the outside, that they don't really think about the things they've been doing that maybe have been holding them back or not letting them kind of get the things done that they want to get done, and they're wasting time, or they don't have a routine structure and they think, I'll just wing it. And it cuts a lot into productivity and their impact they're able to have on the people around them. So it makes a lot of sense that, even though it might be a struggle with a lot of things going on, that you continue to work on that and get that down. Are you reading anything interesting now? Is there anything, any books and, I don't know, podcasts, whatever you take in a lot of? Is there anything good?
Did I not grab the book? I don't think I did grab the book. I'm doing I'm reading an IFS therapy book. So I'm kind of like a therapy trauma nerd, and I think it's in the car. Because like I got a bachelor's in psychology, because my thing was I wanted to understand how I went from this like largely functional, like okay kid to like driving down the road and shooting somebody. Like what was the process? Like what happened there? And so that was a big part of my self-understanding about my search for redemption. And what I've realized is that I have a lot of like trauma and patterns that I have to address to continue to grow, because otherwise I'm going to regress. So I'm really interested in that. That was something I started the other day because I read, it's called No Bad Parts. It's just the general internal family systems therapy stuff. Carrie Blankenshir's, oh my God, no, I can't remember it. Corrections in Ink is absolutely amazing. Like if you enjoy writing, like incredibly good writing, she's part of the reason I'm now scared to write a book, because like I have a story to tell, but I'm not gonna be able to tell it half as well as she did. I just read something. I just read a Drama of the Gifted Child, which again is like a thing about, therapy. And so I'm kind of like a therapy trauma nerd. So I don't necessarily have the like liveliest conversations around literature. But that's been one of the ones that's been really cool. Is I had a bunch of people ask me what I read in prison or what inspired me. So I put together a list of books on my Linktree. And so I've had family members say, oh, I ordered these books for my son, or I ordered these books for my daughter, or I ordered these books for my husband. And then they've gotten this response and been like, oh my God, they love this book. Or like they said it gave them so much insight, or they said it gave them so much help. So even when I can't directly do it, like I can share the resources or kind of the direction of the resources that seem to make a difference. And that's the same thing, that feeling of like satisfaction, that feeling of like meaning and purpose. And that's a really gratifying place to be.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think literature and good writing can do that in such a unique way. And I and many, many others will be the first in line if you put out a book. I'm sure that, you say that about Carrie's book and other books. Say, oh, I couldn't, but you have a story and you have the passion and the personality to communicate it well. And that translates, whether that's through a TikTok or a podcast or a book. I think that stuff comes through. It's hard to fake it, and people can tell when it's like someone just trying to get attention versus someone saying, hey, there's important work to be done here. Here's my story as it's presented. Talking a little bit more about what someone can do to boost your message, I think there were two areas I wanted to ask you about, that kind of a broader one and a smaller one. So first with the bigger picture, is there a way in the day-to-day life of somebody who maybe just consumes your content in their local community and with the people that are around them, even if they don't know someone who's incarcerated or they're not facing that themselves, but that they can kind of reframe and change the approach and the knowledge that people have about returning citizens?
I think that having a conversation about people is one of the biggest things, because it's like the whole not in my backyard thing. It's really easy to say, oh, well, I don't want a criminal in my backyard. But once you get to know me, or you get to know Carrie, or you get to know Colin, you're like, wait a minute, like I actually really like this person, or this person's doing really good work. And all of a sudden the discussion isn't about like a them or an other. It's about a human being. And so I think that's one of the things I always try to prioritize is kind of person first thinking, not saying a convict, but saying a person who was incarcerated or a person who whatever, because putting a face on people and putting a name on people is really important. And that's the same advice I give people who are looking for a job who say, hey, I've been out for 6 months and I can't get a job. I said, well, stop just filling out stop filling out applications, sending them in, like walk into every business, talk to every manager, shake a hand, like put a face to that name and become a person to them, because it's a lot harder to turn somebody away at the door when it's a person who you saw and you might've liked or thought was funny or thought was whatever. So I think person first thinking is important. And then supporting any local measure, like any local kind of halfway house that's actually responsibly run, any restorative justice program, which I think is absolutely vital and is the future of justice. Supporting, resources, supporting second chance hiring, because there's still a lot of places in the country where it is difficult to get a job as a felon. And I was really lucky to come back to a town where the hospital, where the largest university, where all these people are willing to give people a second chance, and I can direct them in that direction. We have some great nonprofits like Network to Work. And I think that's really important. But I think, it comes down to ultimately is not seeing people as another and not automatically disqualifying people because of their past.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thinking about it as it might not be someone I know or something in my life today, but I never know. And even if it never directly, quote unquote, impacts me, someone else's life proceeding does impact me. We're all part of a community to some extent, and you may not know the direct impact that you have. Yeah, that's great. And then a little bit more minutely, like for you specifically, what is something that I and listeners and people that find your content can do to boost what you're doing? I know I've seen you have links on your link tree that can support you by people downloading things and kind of going down that direction. Is there anything else as well, though, that we can kind of signal boost what you're doing out into the world?
I have a Patreon page if people want to support me directly, or the nonprofit that we have, I would love to kind of get that message out there and be connected with other nonprofits and other service providers so we can actually provide reentry services as well as possibly housing and resources in the future, which I'm really kind of passionate about. You can share videos or talk to your friends about it. I don't think it's so much about me as it is about getting that message out there. So like when you Adnan Syed is a great example. The man spent 23 years in prison because a prosecutor withheld exculpatory evidence. Was just like, okay, well, this would probably get you to not be convicted, so we're just not going to tell anybody.
Right.
I think standing up and saying things like that are not okay, and that there needs to be accountability, that there needs to be change, that there needs to be some kind of approach to saying this isn't about winning and losing. This is about someone's life. This is about an actual human being. So, I appreciate the personal support, and I'm gladly happy to receive it. I want it to be a bigger message because I don't want it to be about me, partly because that makes me really self-conscious, and partly because it's just fundamentally not about me. It is about a community, and I love the opportunities this gives me and the places I get to go and the things I get to do, but I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for the other people who are getting out, who I want to have a second chance. I'm doing this for the family members who have somebody incarcerated. I'm doing it for the victims of crime who've reached out to me to talk about what they've needed and what they've gotten or not gotten in their experience and how we can better provide that. I want this to be an approach that actually helps the people that need it most on all sides of the equation, and not just one specific group or one specific person.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great and humble. I think that's great to want to boost something that's more community and it's out there and it's a whole bigger picture and it's not just you. We have a couple more minutes here, and while we wrap up, I want to go a little outside of prison talk and criminal justice reform. It's important stuff, but I don't want you and what you talked about not wanting that to be 100% of your identity. What are the things right now that you're really passionate about that are completely separated from that? We mentioned motorcycles a little bit, but what's going on for you that's really exciting?
So one of my buddies got out of prison. I picked him up back in July, and I always told him, I was like, man, when you get out, I'm going to make sure I got a bike for you. I'm going to make sure. And so I did. I went and bought another motorcycle, which was I spent all of my savings I shouldn't have done, but now he has one bike and I have another, and he was actually supposed to come down and ride yesterday. But it's I get to ride with people, and that's somebody who all those years inside, we'd be out on the soccer field, we'd be working together. It was we're going to get on a motorcycle one day. We've actually been able to do we've been able to go riding together, which has been amazing. There's also a group of military and ex-military contractors I ride with, which is the weirdest group. I just kind of wandered into them one time, and now we go riding together. And we're hoping to go do a track day, which I'm really looking forward to. But it's also, it's an awesome community. I had an issue. I put a new brake lever on my bike actually yesterday, and I didn't install it correctly, so my brakes kept locking up. So I'm stuck in town. I got no way to get home, and I give this guy a call, and he's 25 minutes later, he's there. He's like, what's up, Jesse? What do you need? He helps off. He's got all the tools. He shows me what I'm doing. And this is a community of people that I have that I know I can call this guy, and he knows he can call me, and he wants help putting his shop together. And it's I've been able to build again, that same kind of sense of community, maybe not to the same degree, but as I had in prison, like people who have a common love and a common interest. And it's a great experience.
Yeah, that's cool. And you mentioned jujitsu a little bit at the beginning of our conversation here, and I know that probably has many of those same elements of community.
Very much so. It's so I've like loved martial arts since I was a little kid, like growing up with like Steven Seagal or Van Damme or Bruce Lee. And then I did karate as a kid, and then I wrestled in high school. When I got to prison, the first person I got to had a boxing program. And so I kind of got into that, and then I ran into somebody else, and he started teaching me like Chinese martial arts. And then I ran into a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, but I never really had the chance to like sit down and really study. I was just kind of like picking up from somebody who knew a little bit or reading from books that were smuggled in. And so getting out, one of the first things I did was go find a gym. And like I couldn't afford it. It didn't make any sense, but like somehow I got in the door and I did it. And the community is so strong that I was living in town originally when I joined so I was like 2 minutes away. But now I'm like 40 minutes away, and it doesn't make sense. And I should really join a gym that's closer. But I love the people at 6 a.m. class that I go to. And our instructor in the day is like the best instructor I've found. So I keep going. Like, it doesn't make sense, but it's that community. And I don't want to leave that community. But it's so great. And I'm going to do a competition in December. We did like an in-house competition I did really well at, and I felt good. And I was like, I want to do it. Then I like messed my knee up, and then I've been out of town. So I signed up, and now I got no excuses. I got to get in shape, and I got to be ready because they're going to send somebody really tough at me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's very exciting. That'll be cool. And it's neat to be able to do that locally in the core community, but have them boost you up and be like, hey, you can do it. We'll help you train. We'll get ready, and you're able to go do something competitive. That's really neat. That's really exciting. And it's cool to hear that you get time and some energy to put into passions that aren't just making videos and talking about prison life, and that there's a wide world out there. Yeah, well, I really appreciate your time. I don't want to hold you too long here. Like I said, I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on, but I really appreciate your time. It's really cool to hear a story that has importance and weight in the age of just everybody online talking about everything for no reason all the time. It's nice to hear a story that has some impact and has some forward trajectory and can do good out there. So I appreciate that, and I will continue to keep up with your progress. I got to let you know I was really nervous to talk to you because I've been watching your content for so long, and it's just like you'd see somebody over the screen for a long time. And I was like, all right, well, I gotta try to come up with questions he hasn't answered before and all of that. But really exciting stuff. And congratulations again to you and Courtney. It's been really great as a fan, as a viewer, to see your guys' relationship and see how happy you both are.
Thank you. It's been an honor. I appreciate you.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I will let you go. Thanks for talking, Jesse. And I'll put links to all of your things in the description down there. So I'll make sure that I get all that from you and we put it all there so people can find these resources and connect with you and the work that you're doing and those other creators we mentioned, and read the books that you recommend too, since they're so great.
Sounds good. All right.
All right.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks. Bye-bye.